I am to develop and report an understanding of the theoretical and practical role of noise as a form of randomness in biological organization and evolution within this context of synthetic biology. So more or less we all share this idea of synthetic biology as something that conceptualizes the functional dimensions of the systems that is altering or constructing. So in my mind, we have this idea of evolution and then these new ideas from evolutionary biology that we can trace back to Darwin or nowadays from Giuseppe Longo, Barbara Bravi, and Christian Escalude, in which physical randomness, if properly understood, should not be seen as noise in complex systems, not isolated systems. So this is particularly true of living systems, where randomness has a functional role that contributes in an essential way to the structural stability of the system dynamics. So in the context that we are talking about today, within synthetic biology research, we use the term noise referred to stochastic fluctuations that are random processes which have a functional status. So I would argue that we should not call these intrinsically random aspects of ontophylogenesis noise, but rather consider them indispensable components of biological stability. So randomness is so intrinsic to the evolutionary stability of those systems that it can be argued that there is no noise for such systems. So basically I am going to say this over and over again for 15 minutes. So noise in general as such for mathematicians and so refers to small and frequent fluctuations in general, which actually may disturb the achieved stability of these supposed biological systems. So we can do the analogy with noise as a signal that disrupts a message. But a system is robust when it resists noise. So random mutation and copying errors in genetic replication have also been theorized as noise. However, I argue that this kind of variability is so functional in biological evolution that describing it as noise is an illegitimate and misleading overextension of the term. So I am trying to develop this within the context of synthetic biology because only with the introduction of synthetic modeling and novel imaging methods did noise begin to cover all the unknown and known forms of fluctuations. These new methods made visible the non-genetic fluctuations on the level of single cells, and these are fluctuations that in the past had remained invisible in the previously studied population levels. These sources of fluctuations in biological organisms are largely unknown in all but a few cases, as is their exact impact on the dynamics of biological systems. And one reason for the use of the notion of noise then, I guess, is exactly this uncertainty. And noise functions both as an umbrella term and as a placeholder for the emerging research of different forms of fluctuations. And their sources and consequences for the dynamics of biological systems. So, the scientific concepts are often associated with specific modeling methods and computational templates. Yet, as the case of noise shows, they can also undergo semantic transformations and subsume new kinds of research agendas employing novel modeling tools. And here I would like to argue that the investigation of the role of the concept of noise in synthetic biology must entail an account of both the structural resilience of a system to noise and the investigation of the functional integration of randomness and how to denominate it. Because I argue that rather than being synonymous, the functional integration of randomness makes a system more robust against noise. So, while in engineering, noise is a destructive force perturbing artificial systems, in synthetic biology, it has acquired an additional functional meaning. It has been found out that noise is an important factor in driving biological processes such as gene regulation, development, and evolution. But side by side the functional meaning of noise, also the more traditional understanding of noise as a parasitic and harmful force, still continue to exist in synthetic biology. So, what is then the epistemic rationale of using the notion of noise in both of these opposite meanings, even within a same field? How this situation come about? And I think the emergence of the functional meaning of noise marks an important shift in how engineering concepts are employed in this field, because the notion of noise serves also to highlight the difference between the two branches of synthetic biology, the basic science-oriented branch and the engineering-oriented branch, which differ from each other in the way they draw analogies to various other fields of study. And we have synthetic biologists in the engineering-oriented branch, usually proceeding as engineers do, and they treat noise as a nuisance that one should get rid of. But at the same time, in the last 20 years, by contrast, there has been an ongoing lively discussion in the basic science-oriented branch of synthetic biology concerning these functional aspects of noise. And in the work of these researchers, noise has retained the older meaning as a nuisance, as something disruptive, but they also address its functional role, believing it to be a crucial and distinctive characteristic of biological processes. Moreover, even though engineering concepts such as robustness, standardization, redundancy, and noise form the key concepts of synthetic biology, it is often forgotten that in synthetic biology, analogies are not only drawn to engineering. In fact, synthetic biology is, as we know, a highly interdisciplinary field of research that is located at the interface of such fields as physics, chemistry, biology, and computational science. So, in the application-oriented branch of synthetic biology, the functional role of noise is presently recognized as a very important part of these systems. However, instead of providing an interesting new research object in its own right, it usually poses a serious challenge for the attempt to design novel biological systems that can function in a reliable and predictable fashion. So, this branch of synthetic biology does not aim to mimic biological systems, but to engineer novel systems with specific functions which need not be brought about in the same ways as in naturally evolved systems. Because of this goal, and also due to the close ties with engineering, noise is predominantly regarded as a disturbance within this branch, to the extent that it reduces it to control over the designed biological systems. And much effort has therefore been invested in strategies to avoid or to reduce noise. So consequently, it may not come as a surprise that these analogies are drawn in a different way and to different kinds of systems that in the basic science-oriented component of synthetic biology. So in the engineering and application-oriented branch of synthetic biology, engineered systems as well as the practice of engineering serve as models for how to engineer reliable biological systems. And this practice can be justified by the idea that actual biological systems are flexible enough to allow for the realization of different engineering paradigms. But it is also possible that the variability we observe in biological systems is of such a basic importance that it cannot be avoided, and the task of engineers, in my opinion, is to find such ways of dealing with it that take into account this specificity of biological systems. Because in the context of engineering, one recognizes many different forms of noise, like the unwanted signals in information theory that interfere with the signal containing the information to be transmitted, or the acoustic noise in the form of meaningless and very loud sounds, or electric noise, or with the form of fluctuations in, electric currents or something like that. And then we have two approaches to deal with this observed noise that I think are indicative of the difference between the engineering-oriented and the basic science-oriented branches of synthetic biology. So on one hand, one can pursue the positive analogy between the artificial biological systems by treating the fluctuations as a disturbance and trying to find ways of making the system more robust by changing its architecture. And this approach is chosen by the, let's say, the engineering-oriented branch of synthetic biology, which uses different strategies to isolate and eliminate the various sources of noise. And then the basic science approach, by contrast, has chosen the opposite direction, drawing a further negative analogy to artificial control systems. And they recognize noise as an intrinsic part of biological systems. And the researchers started to study the sources and impact of noise on biological systems. And as a result, noise has also been assigned a functional role, and it supports the various functions on biological systems. And I have to clarify that the fact that the engineering approach sees noise as something negative that should be eliminated does not mean that in principle these researchers they wouldn't deny that noise could have a functional meaning. But we have to keep in mind that scientists working in the engineering-oriented branch are constrained by their aim to come up with engineered biological objects, such, for example, bacteria, that could be used for specific purposes, like, for example, the production of vaccines and biofuels. And from this perspective, noise contradicts the goal of designing reliable and predictable systems. So these engineering-specific constraints become even more critical when it comes to engineering such biological objects as cancer cell-killing bacteria, which are brought into the human body and interact directly with parts of it, so it's completely non-insulated environment. And in this context, any kind of behavior deviating from the one from which the bacteria was designed, like destroying a specific kind of cell, this could lead to serious damage. So the scientists in the basic science branch of synthetic biology are not limited by these engineered constraints. Their focus is, as I am trying to explain, gaining more insight into the basic design principles underlying specific functions. But my big open question is whether the presently intensively studied topic by the basic science approach, the functional meaning of noise, and the non-genetic variations producing it, pose a serious obstacle for applying the engineering approach to biology. Because in biology, randomness is an integral part of variability, thus of adaptation and diversity, both in reference to small numbers and to large numbers. Randomness contributes by this to biological structural stability as a peculiar form of resilience. It is, I think, an evolutionary fact that a population of a few thousands of animals is more stable if diverse. But diversity in large populations as well, or in species, contributes to stability, far away from this averaging out proper to noise in stochastic dynamics from physics. And that is both within an organism and I think in the ecosystem. Diversity, variability, and number of components play a diverse role, and randomness, as a component of variability, adaptation, and diversity, becomes functional as such to biological dynamics. So my final remark, as I told you, is that biological organisms and ecologies are so complex, hierarchically nested systems in which this multi-level randomness is so intrinsic to their stability that I think noise is not a pertinent concept in explaining their dynamics. So I am open to listen to your ideas, but I think when we are reading all this research about noise-oriented phenomena or development guided by noise, we should pay attention to what are we understanding by noise. Well, that's all.
Yes,
Thank you.
Questions for Miguel?
I'm not clear why the fact that noise has a functional role in biological systems means that it isn't noise. I mean, is this just debate about? Is this just debate about terminology, or should we be using a different concept?
How do you say that at the beginning?
Why does the fact that noise has, or that randomness or random fluctuations have a function within biological systems mean that we shouldn't call it noise? I'm not clear what the stakes are here, why it matters what we call it, really.
Because I think if, first of all, the first link that you could establish between noise and organization would be entropy. And in this case, noise in interaction with this kind of complex systems is not acting as entropy. Actually, it would be acting as negative entropy. Yeah. It's consuming this activity to provide, let's say, life, or to achieve a higher degree of stability. It's when, thanks to random fluctuations, for example, in your gait, you are walking in a platform that it's moving, and you improve your gait thanks to improve your balance of this weird behavior of the. Thanks to this, the system that it's your balance was improved and is more robust because of a random process. But imagine this process has no time. We are not measuring this time. You are only walking across this platform once, and this random process occurs anyway. Suddenly, it's noise because it couldn't help you for your stability. You lost your stability. It's a matter of like you are generating a model for a system, or you are measuring a single event in time that interrupt you for the function. The function in this case is not you, sorry for this very bad explanation, it's not you crossing one time the platform. It's like living in the platform. You know what I mean? If you are crossing just once this platform and you have this fluctuation and you cannot cross it, it's noise. But if you are living in this platform, it could provide you like a higher degree of balance. And I don't think it's pertinent to call it noise. Was any clear or not?
Yeah, no, that was a good answer actually. That's really interesting. I'm wondering, I mean, I suppose does a lot depend on how we localise the system where the noise occurs, because you know, if we're just thinking about, if we've got some input to a system that's random, and presumably we can describe that input as noisy in the sense that it's, say in a kind of information theoretic sense, that it's very hard to compress a description of it. You know, but that doesn't mean that it can't have a functional role within the wider system.
Yes.
But
yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree completely.
Yeah, my question is sort of a continuation of your question, so it will probably overlap a bit. But also, the question of noise, depending on where you sort of situate the level of the system border. So that if you have a gas and you look at it on a molecular level, it will look like random movements. But if you you go up a level, or you will have it will look like a stable system with a stable temperature and pressure, right? So you can measure it on different levels, and you get like Brownian movement, and everything looks chaotic, and you get a stable system if you move up a level. And you could do the same with evolution, where on a sort of a shorter time scale, you get mutations and selections, but on a very large time scale, you get sort of a nice linear evolution of a species. And I think you could come up with several of these examples, and also your example of balancing on a platform would then be, if you isolate the system to just the person and not the person and the platform, if she sort of fluctuates in her movement, her balance will not really help. But if she's in a system where there's an sort of unstable platform and she's also fluctuating her movement, it will sort of create higher level, more stable systems and so on, right? So my question is, where do you localize noise, and isn't it the question of levels more than a question of terminology?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent I agree with you, but basically the problem that I have is calling noise some processes that we recognize as specific random processes, and we have names for this. And then your main question is very interesting. If we are trying to decipher a system and we establish some kind of frame for its structural stability or the boundary of its phase transition, we could determine that something beyond this point could disorganize and not destroy, but loses completely its structural stability, so it's not providing any good means for its organization. But yes, I think it's constrained completely within the model that you are using to analyze the system. But my main problem is using the terminology associated with noise from classical thermodynamics or classical informational theory with far from equilibrium systems that are much more complex and are like the example that you use, in which different systems are interacting. And it's like a quite old-fashioned way to see these random processes in non-equilibrium systems, in the interaction of non-equilibrium systems.